Hello and welcome to Smaulgld's Indian gold import update for the year ended 2017. Well, 2017 Indian gold imports were huge. They were 4 times those of the Russian gold reserve record additions that were reported just last week. Indian gold imports are 901 tons. That equals, for those of you keeping track in ounces, to 28,976,823 ounces. That was up 55% from the 582 ounces that India imported in 2016. India imports in December were a strong 83.335 tons, or about 2.5 million ounces. Indian gold imports in 2017 were, as we mentioned, 4 times greater than that record amount of gold, those 224 tons that the Central Bank of Russia added in 2017. To give you further perspective, according to the World Gold Council, 3,269 tons approximately were mined in 2017, and India imported about 28% of it with those 901 tons. Let's take a look at some of the charts I've prepared for you. By the way, if you're interested in silver and cryptocurrencies, you can click on these links here and purchase silver rounds in the form of Litecoin with Bitcoin, Ethereum, Monero, Zcash, Ripple, and NEO stamped on them, so you can combine your love for cryptocurrencies and silver bullion, and Smaulgld gets a small commission on those coins. Now let's take a look at the year in review. So most months averaged well over 50 tons a year in 2017 for India. India is a country, as you know, for generations and generations has a love affair with gold, but their country hates that. They love it so much, and they do many things as possible to try to stop them from importing gold. And the reason for that is just the normal reason that governments don't like its citizens to have gold, but also because it screws up their balance of trade. India has no significant operating gold mine, so it has to import about 100% of its gold demand, and then there's also some internal scrap that they can satisfy their demand from. But for the most part, it comes in, and so from other countries, and India's balance of trade gets screwed up. So India has placed tariffs on gold since 2013. There's a 10% import duty. There's been jewelry tax. There's been goods and services taxes. They've done everything they can do to try to curb the desire of Indians to have gold. They have tried to do a gold monetization scheme where they've asked the citizens to turn in their gold and get certificates of bonds where they're going to get interest on their gold for turning it in. They've got very little response to that. Some of the temples did loan the government some money. Very few individual citizens have done it. Indian entrepreneurs are trying to sell digital gold, but unlike in the West, where the vast majority of gold demand is satisfied through digital or paper products like ETFs in Europe and in the United States, the Indians still, as you can tell by these massive numbers, prefer to have and own the silver bullion, the silver bangles. They give it at weddings. They give it during festivals, Indian festivals. It is a way of wearing and preserving wealth through generations through the purchase and holding and giving of gold. And you can see each and every month here a very large amount coming into India, and that becoming over 900 tons during the year. Let's take a look at a longer-term monthly chart. One of the things to know about Indian gold is Indian gold demand is it is very strong in the rural areas. Remember, where they don't have bank accounts. Maybe 50-60% of the country doesn't have bank accounts yet. And in those areas, gold is how they preserve their wealth. And if they're farmers, they rely on the monsoon rainy season. And if you have a good one, then obviously the farmers are going to have more than just their subsistence level. They're going to be able to sell more crops, and therefore they're going to have some extra money. And what are they going to do with it with those rupees? They're going to buy gold. In this chart, you can see in 2016, there was a bit of a lull. Last year, 2016, was a bit of a low year for India in terms of gold imports. And that had a lot to do with the rising price of gold in the run-up to Brexit. Indians purchase gold because they're not in it for the short swing profit. They're in it generally. They buy gold. It's generational wealth. And so when the price rises, they, like most consumers, when the price rises, they buy less of it. When the price gets lower, they see a bargain and they move in and they buy it. Unlike in the West where you have people chasing, they see a stock, and ETFs now are basically traded like stocks, gold ETFs like GLD. People will chase those higher as they're going higher, whereas the Indians will hold off on their purchases. But again, if they hold off for too long and the price basically keeps at the levels of the high price and they realize that 1,300 is going to be the price, well, then you have pent-up demand. And as you can see, the gold demand picked up later in 2017. Let's take a look at the historic gold purchases since 1999. Well, they're purchases, really, even though they're imports, but it's basically the amount of gold demand in India is derived from imports. So 900 tons imported in 2017, 582 tons in 2016, as we mentioned. A lot to do with the price rising in the first half and middle of the year. Also, 2016 was the year where President Modi, or Prime Minister, I'm not sure what he is, but the head of the country went on TV late in the fall and said that the rupees that you hold, about 80-85% of the rupees in circulation, would no longer be valid and you'd have to turn them in and a couple of days and they wouldn't be worth anything after that. That hindered gold demand because while the initial reaction was people took the rupees and went and bought gold while they were still good, but there was a cash shortage for a while and people had no cash from which to buy gold. Once that worked its way through the system in early 2017, you can see then the gold demand picked up and you had a record, not a record, but one of the largest months in the last couple of years. In May, 124 tons of gold imported. The biggest year for gold imports into India was 2011, and that was also coincidentally the year where the price hit its peak of about $1,900, $1,911 about in the United States. And you could see those twin towers next to it, 2010, 2012, also very strong years, over 900 tons. We see a bit of a dip here, 2013 and 14, but then a big strong comeback in 2017. But if you see before the financial crisis in the late 1990s, early 2000s, this is a period where India had 300, 400, 500 ton demand. It's basically elevated to double that. Part of the reason is not so much that Indians caught on that the world is a treacherous place with a lot of debt and so on. It's a lot to do with India being one of the fastest growing economies in the world, India being one of the most populous countries in the world. So basically what you're doing is you're giving people who are naturally inclined to buy gold more money, and when they see that opportunity, they go out and they buy more gold. So a lot of this has to do with Indian culture and then the Indian economy taking off and Indians adding to their gold positions. Now, here's what I was talking about. This chart comes from Nick Laird. Also, the data comes from Nick Laird, who pulls it from the official site in India. When he's put this together, it's interesting. It highlights what I was talking about, how gold imports screw up the Indian balance of trade, because the gold as a percentage of Indian imports can reach as high as almost 20%. So recently it's been, in the last few months, about 8%. That's still a pretty significant portion. But when it gets below 10%, the Indian government isn't as concerned about putting the brakes on as when it gets up to 15, 20%, because it does really mess up with their balance of trade. Well, that about does it. I want to thank you very much for listening. If you'd like to add gold to your own stack, please consider buying gold at SD Bullion, BGSC, Golden Eagle Coins, Money Metals Exchange, through the links on the site or below this BitChute and YouTube. If you buy through those links, you pay no more, no less than if you visited those sites directly, and Smaulgld does get a small commission. One last thing, where does India, the country, the Royal Bank of India, stand versus other countries. Now, we reported the other week that Russia had passed China. We're talking not Russia or China. We're talking the central banks of Russia and China. China being the People's Bank of China and Russia being the central bank of the Federation of Russia, and India being the Royal Bank of India. You can see the Indian bank is in 10th place. Now, if you look at 557 tons, you think that's crazy. India has more. They do. India, the country, certainly has more. It's been estimated that India has between 18,000 and 22,000 tons in the country, in individual hands, and also in temples. The bulk of that being in an individual Indian citizen's hands. Thank you very much for listening. And tomorrow we'll do Indian silver imports for the year ended 2017. Thanks for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, and also consider becoming a Smaulgld patron or donating to Smaulgld to help these reports coming. And you could do that through PayPal. You could do it through paying through Bitcoin or donating via Litecoin. Thank you very much.